I've loved SCP for years. I started this channel because of it, and I still have a fascination for it. It's like one of the most interesting things I've come across on the internet, and I wonder, why? If you already know what the SCP Foundation is and don't really want to listen to me babble on for 5 minutes, skip to the next section. SCP stands for Special Containment Procedures and is a collection of documents outlining the procedures needed to contain an SCP object. The SCP Foundation is a fictional organization that keeps these SCP items in safe locations and prevents them from causing chaos in the world. Each SCP is generally given one of 3 classes: Safe, Euclid, and Keter. There are others, but these are the most common. Safe SCPs are the least dangerous objects still protected by the Foundation. They're known to be relatively harmless or well understood, making them easy to contain. Safe SCPs can be extremely dangerous, however. To quote a good analogy the SCP Foundation uses, a nuclear bomb would be considered safe as it's easily containable. If uncontained, it could be catastrophic. Euclid SCPs are the most difficult to contain, due to requiring more resources to do so. Euclid SCPs are usually more dangerous since they are more unpredictable, not understood, or even sentient. The majority of SCP objects actually fall under this classification. Keter SCPs are extremely difficult to contain. They require extensive and complex methods for containment and sometimes cannot even be contained consistently. Some of the most deadly SCPs are classified as Keter. These SCPs aren't always dangerous though, just difficult to contain effectively. SCP articles are written to document each SCP object. An SCP object is always given a designation, always being SCP followed by a number. An article contains containment procedures, a description, and other noteworthy sections. Currently, there are almost 7,000 official SCP objects that have been documented, and there are more being added like literally every day. SCPs come in all shapes and sizes, and I wanted to show you a few of my favorites. SCP-002, a living room made of meat. SCP-111, a bunch of extremely intelligent artificial snails. SCP-096, a tall white guy with a really bad temper. SCP-6996, literally just the color red. What? What even is this? Why is this an SCP? SCP-173, the original SCP. It's a sculpture that has a strange fascination with necks. SCP-682, a giant fucking lizard that literally cannot die. SCP-3008, IKEA. SCP is one of the scariest things I've come across on the internet. The idea that there could be thousands of unexplainable phenomena just in the world, only being contained by a single organization, is frightening to say the least. Some SCPs aren't necessarily scary, but those that are really are. Take SCP-173 for example. Not only does it have an unexplainable thirst for death, but it's practically unstoppable if you come across it alone. It can only move when nobody's looking at it. This means if you get caught near it alone, you either never blink or you die. This isn't even the scary part. The thing can duplicate. One is horrific enough, but this thing clones itself, and I don't know about you, but I would just let it get me at that point. The extremely strict formatting rules and highly formal appearance of the SCP Foundation also add to the realism and intrigue. The consistent format, fancy sounding terms, and constant censoring gives off the feeling that you're reading something only top government officials should be seeing. Some SCP documents are quite extensive as well. I've seen pages with seemingly unending sections about tests and conversations, all about a single SCP. People have gotten very creative, and it shows. Over time, SCP has gotten more and more odd. This makes sense because a lot of the more simple ideas have already been taken. Things are getting more abstract and sometimes completely nonsensical, which honestly fits the universe well. SCP-5084 is a funny example of this. It's literally just a bunch of tomatoes that make people think they're sentient. What? It's so bizarre, yet so intriguing. There's another SCP I found extremely interesting, SCP-2000. It's a massive facility that basically restarts the universe in case of a world-ending scenario. After reading a bit about it, I just wondered, how many times has this already been used? These are the types of questions that make me love SCP so much. The amount of lore in this universe is unfathomably large, and it contradicts itself constantly, only because each writer can incorporate their own spin on the universe. There are only 4 constants in the SCP universe. They always must contain anomalies, they are called SCPs, there's always a special containment procedure and a description, and they're called the SCP Foundation. Anything outside these constants is free reign for whatever odd or insane idea somebody comes up with. Anybody can write an SCP, and they can make it as bizarre as they want. SCP itself could be thought as the collective imagination of thousands of people. That's the beauty of the Foundation. The community doesn't stop at the Wiki. There are hundreds of external media that expand upon the already huge universe. There are games, each game brings a new SCP idea to the table and makes it a whole new experience. I started this channel making SCP Secret Laboratory videos, and I've had some of the most fun gaming moments in that game. I only even heard of SCP through Gary's mod add-ons, where I found an SCP-173 mod and thought it was, scary. And I mean, I started going down the rabbit hole, going through lots of YouTube videos, and looking at all these different SCPs. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So, I mean, I looked it up more, and I got games, eventually Secret Laboratory. I'm like, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel, and that's pretty much it. And ever since, I've just been kind of obsessed with it. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. It definitely took me quite some time to finish it, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later. Let me know if you like this kind of stuff. I can definitely do more of this. Thank you.